This is Gemara Baba Basra Daf Nun Gimel, and we're holding on the bottom of Nun Beis Amid Beis, about 14 lines from the bottom at the two dots, quoting the end of the Mishnah, which taught us Ba'amed Dvarim Amurim. When do these dinim apply? B'machazik, Avol b'noisen b'matana. But if one gives a matana, or v'achad shalcholku, it's going to be a different din. So the question is that the Mishnah seems to indicate that when one is given a gift, or brothers that divide an estate, there is not going to be a chazaka between them. But says the Gemara, to call hani damrinan lavini chazakininu. Are all these people in the Mishnah not able to do any form of chazaka? Meaning, aside for the cheskes gimel shanim, what about locking the fence? What about fencing in the property? Says the Gemara, Chasure Mechsera, classically, V'hachi Katani. This is how you have to read the Mishnah. When do we say that he cannot make chazaka with regard to chazaka, which has a taina? Kegoin, for example, Moichani or Loi Macharti. Someone where the seller says, a case where the seller, the previous owner says, I did not sell the land, or I didn't sell the land. Excuse me, no, let's read that properly. The seller says, Loi macharti. I purchased the land. So in such a scenario, that this is a case that you need Gimel Shanim in order to create a chazaka. Avol chazaka sheini matayna, chazaka that does not contain a taina kigoin. No, you say matana v'achin shecholku v'amachzik v'nechsei ager. Someone who gets a matana, brothers divide. Someone who's taking a chazak in the properties of a ger. The purpose of this chazaka is just to acquire. It's not a chazaka that's coming against something. It's not a requirement of Gimel Shanim. Then, 5 lines from the bottom. Noal, Godar, Poratz, Kolshu, then of course, Harezu chazaka. So unlocked fence to breach even to a little bit, it will yes be a chazaka. So explains the Gemara that when the Mishnah said is no chazaka, it meant is no cheskes gimel shanim, but avada they have the regular chazaka. Says the Gemara, Tani Rav Hoshia, 4 lines from the bottom. Bikdusha Devei Levi. He taught this in Kiddushin, which is a Masechta put together in the yeshiva of Levi. Noal Godar Parat Kolshu. If he fenced in, locked, or he breached the property, Shehu Bifanav, in front of the seller, Harezu Chazaka. Says the Gemara, from the way that he taught this brisa, what does it sound like? It sounds like Bifanav in, Shalai Bifanav Loi. It sounds like such a chazaka only works if the seller is there. But Shalai Bifanav, but if it's not in his presence, then Loi, then it does not work. Says the Gemara, why should it have to be in the presence of the person selling it? Amar Rava, teaches Rava, Hachi Kamar. This is what's going on over here. Bifanav, if the chazaka is in front of the seller, then loitzarach lememar. Then the seller does not have to tell the buyer leich chazeku kini. Loitzarach lememar leich chazeku kini. Meaning, if the seller is there and the guy buying it goes and locks the fence, makes a hole in the fence or something like that, that is implicitly that the seller is maskim because he watches him do it, and therefore it's going to be a chazaka. Whereas Shaloi Bifanav, as we turn over to Nun Gimel Amid Aleph, if he does any of these things, Naal Godaru Paratz, Shaloi Bifanav, not in the presence of the seller, then the seller has to say, go make a kinyan, and only then will this act of making a fence, etc., be considered a chazak. Says the Gemara, let's ask a fundamental shayla. that when did we say in the Mishnah that you won't have a chazaka in the case of, we just finished saying that there's only a chazaka of Naal Gadar Uparatz if the seller says Lech Chazeku Kini, or he is there. Asks the Gemara, Boyi Rav Matana Heich. What is the status of a matana? The person accepting the gift, does he need to be told by the giver, Lech Chazek Ukini, or is he able to make these chazakas in all scenarios? Says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel, Maiti Baile. Says Shmuel, what exactly? Maiti Baile la'aba. What is Abba? What is Rav asking? When it comes to a sale where the buyer gives money for the item, yet what do we just say? That it only works if the seller told him to make a kinyan not matana. When it comes to a gift, lo kol shekain, then it's obvious that it's only going to work because he did not give anything. So certainly it's only going to work if he's told leich chazek ukini. That's what Shmuel says. Rav who asked the Shiloh, what does he hold? That when one gives a gift, he does it in the most generous fashion, and therefore automatically he allows the person to make the kinyan even without saying it. That was Rav's Shaila, and that's what Rav was wondering, whether he has to actually tell him because do we say that he gives ba'ayin yafeh? Says the Gemara 6 lines down, V'kama kolshu. We say, no, al gadar uparat kolshu. Kiddush Shmuel, damar Shmuel. Gadar, geder v'shlim al asarav. Someone made a fence, and he completed it to a height of 10 tfachim. Uparat pirza, he made a breach, Kiddush yikanes. Or if he made a breach in order that he could enter v'yatza ba, or go through the fence, through the breach, harezu chazaka, that is a chazaka. Ask the Gemara, "Hi geder hechidami. What are the cases of this fence? If the case is where originally you cannot go over you cannot enter through the fence. Meaning, before he put up a fence, he couldn't go in. Before he was mashlim it lasara, you couldn't enter and you still cannot now. My ovid, what did you do? You didn't do anything. It's in the same status as it was originally. Rather, we have to say is originally, before you added onto the fence, you have to enter the property. And now you cannot enter into the property. So Tuva Avad. Ask the Gemara, so why are we calling this a kol shehu? That you did a no'al gader uparet kol shu. What do you mean kol shu? You did a lot. You made the fence a functioning fence. Says the Gemara, originally you could enter in easily. Could only enter in with difficulty, and therefore that's why it's called a minor change to the fence. Hi, pirza echidami. Continues the Gemara trying to figure out these cases. What is the case of creating a pirza in the fence? Originally you can go through the fence. My Avid didn't do anything. Originally you cannot go through the fence. And now you can, yes, go through the fence, enter into the field. Tuvad avad, you did a lot, so why are we calling this a porta? Loitzricha explains the Gemara to Mikar. Originally, you could squeeze through the fence. V'hashta, you widen the opening. Therefore, that's why it's called a kolshu, a little bit of an improvement. Says the Gemara, Ravasi, Amar Rav Yochanan Nasan Srar. If someone gives and places a stone, v'hoyel, and that benefits the land. Not al srar, he takes out a stone, v'hoyel, that benefits the land. Harei zu chazaka, that's considered a chazaka, merely adding or removing a rock from the field. Ask the Gemara, my nasan or my not? Alile manasan srar. If you're going to tell me that, what does it mean? means he puts a stone, v'sacher ma'yaminei, and by placing the stone, it stops water from entering into the field. It's like a plug. Not al tzrar means what? V'apik ma'yaminei. He pulled out a stone, and therefore he allowed water to exit the field. Says the Gemara, this is tantamount from chasing away a lion literally from your friend's property, meaning you're just causing the property to not lose. And that's not considered a positive action. It's not considered a chazaka. It's not considered a betterment. You just caused a lack of loss. So why would that be enough to create a chazaka? Why would that be enough to create a bailus? Says the Gemara, you're right. Elanasa and Sarar, what does that mean? 3 lines at the bottom. Did samad la maya. He seals the water in the field to keep it water irrigated. Or you removed the rack and you allowed water in the field. So now these are positive actions, and that's why they can, yes, create a chazaka. Says the Gemara, 2 lines in the bottom. Shtei sadais, 2 fields. There's 1 border between the field. There are 2 ownerless fields with 1 border. If you did a chazaka to one of the fields to acquire it, but you did not necessarily have intention to acquire the other field, kana, you automatically acquire both fields. Says the Gemara as we turn over to and Gimel Beis, Likna Isa ve'es chaverta. But let's say what you did is you made a chazaka with the intent of acquiring both fields, it and the neighboring fields. Says the Brisa Isa kana chaverta loikana. Then you do not have a kinyan in the next field. Likna says chaverta. If you performed a kinyan in one field with intent only to acquire the next door field, af isa loikana. You don't even acquire it, the field that you are kind. So 3 different scenarios. If you just did a stam chazaka, a stam act, you dug in the field, you have a kinyan on both. If you did something with intent to get both of them, then you only acquire it, not the next field. Why? Because there is lamaisa, a boundary between the 2. If you wanted to acquire the next field, you don't even acquire the one that you did the kinyan on. Let's just take a moment to look at the second Rashbam. The first Rashbam. Then Isa kana levada. אבל חברתו לא יקנה, דמיתר מפסיק, למר רבי יזרח לינה, לכמה בשמייתן, המיתר וחצה מפסיקין בנכסי הגר. So that's the reason why in this case you don't kind. Let's just go back for a moment and look at the bottom Rashbam in the previous summit. It says, Hechslik ba'achsven kon de Rafi and Ba Kilaman and Dalet Aman Aleph. We're going to see v'neskavin liknois levada ulechaverto loy nasan leiv liknois. You didn't think about the neighboring field at all. Kana loy sasad levada. As kula mistama ba'beria kolshu, you would have been a koine both of them. So I think I said it slightly wrong. Let me fix it. In the first case, you dug in one field with no intent at all. You acquire that field. In the second case, you dig in one field. You have intention to acquire both fields. What's the halacha? You only acquire the one that you dug in. The third case is you had intent to acquire the neighboring field. You don't even get the field that you did the act in. And with that, Bayi Rav Zera, 3 lines down, and Gimel Amid Beis, asks Rav Zera, if you did an act in one of the 2 fields, and you wanted to acquire that field, and the boundary, and the adjacent field, you had intent for all 3 areas, itself, the border, and the next field. Mi Amrinan asked the Gemara, do we say Mitzah Arachadu? Do we say that the divider of the land is one and the same, and therefore if you had intent for both, Vikani, you're going to acquire it all? Or do we say no, they're 2 different things? One's a field, and one is the dividing item of the field. For that, you would not have a kinyan on Teku. We're going to have to wait for Eliyahu Navi for that one. And similar, we have a second Shaila. Pai Rav Elazar, 8 lines down. Hechzik b'mitzar. Let's say you did an act on the border with intent. Liknei mahu. Mi'amrina hay mitzar afarsa afasra da'arahu. Do we say that lamaisa, the boundary, is considered the afarsa, the range, that which controls the land? So if you had a kinyan on that, you'll yes have a kinyan v'kani on both fields. Each one is separate. Teiku, says Gemara Nachamo, we have to wait for Eliyahu Navi to answer this Shaila. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabbi Ravua, 12 lines down. First one line is Teiku. Shnei Batim, 2 houses, Zelif Nemizeh. One house is inside the other, an interior and an exterior room. Zelif Nemizeh, Echzik Bechitzayin Liknaisa. Kanoi, if you did a chazak on the outside room to acquire it, then you have a kinyan. Liknaisa Isav Espenimi, if you wanted to acquire both. Chitzain kana b'nimi like kana, just like the case of the fields. But if you did a chazak on the outside one, liknais only as b'nimi, have chitzanami like kana. Continues Rav Nachman in the flip side case. Back in the middle of the Amid, the first one line is hechzik. Hechzik b'pinimi liknoisoi. Kana you have a kinyan. Liknoisoi ve'es achitzoin. Now is where it changes. Kana shneyem. Because you have the inside field and you made a kinyan there, then you also get the outside field. This is only as achitz and avnimi loy kana. So 3 different cases of Rav Nachman. Continues Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabbi Ravua habayna platred gedailim b'nechsei ager. Someone builds a large mansion in the property of a ger that was nifter uba acher v'amida lehem delasais. And someone else comes along after you build this whole house, and he comes and he puts doors onto the house. Says the Gemara, Kana, the one that put the doors on it, he acquires the whole property. Says Gemara, my time, Kama libani ba'almahu. Says the Gemara, because the first guy, he just put some bricks, udapich. But it's not a functioning house until there's a door. So the second guy puts on a door, he gets the whole thing. Amar Rav Dimi, Bar Yosef, Amar Rav Elazar, Amoitzi Platrim and Echsei Ager. If someone finds a platrim, he finds a mansion over the property of a ger that was nifter, v'sad ben siyod echad. And what does he do? He plasters one wall, oikiyar echad, or he makes one design. Kanan, he has a kinyan over the entire mansion. Says the Gemara, v'kama, how much plaster do you have to put? Amar Rav Yosef, 8 lines on the white lines. Amma. Amar Rav Chisdan, and it has to be ukeneged HaPesach, opposite the doorway. And Amar Rav Amar and Hay Milsa. Amar and Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes said this. V'aninun ayon b'masniton. And he opened up her eyes, bringing a raya from a brisa that said, Hamatzi matzayis b'nechsei ger. This is the din, that if someone puts out mats over the property of a ger that died, and he lies on it, kana, he makes a kinyan. And what did he show us? He brought us a raya, 3 lines on the white lines. Mahi detanya, ketzad bechazaka. What's the case you find you could make a kinyan on an evet kanani with a chazaka? Na'alu loy min alay. You put a shoe on him, or you had to loy min alay, you take off his shoe, or shalach kelav acharav, or he carries his clothing after the Beis HaMerchatz. Ve'ev shitai, you undress him. Ve'rachitza, you wash him. Sachai, you rub him with some oil. Gardai, you scrape him clean. Ve'elbishai, you dress him. Ve'nila, you put on shoes. Ve'egbiyai, or you pick him up. Kanai, if any of these actions are done, and again, these are actions done, the slave, the Eved, does these actions for the Rav, for the master, then there is a kinyan. And Amar Rav Shemin, lo techazaka gedayla me hagbash, hagba kana b'chal makayim. So says the Gemara, this is a raya to that which we just said, that if you do an act, like lying on the field, like the Eved, putting on your shoes, you yes have a kinyan. Says the Gemara, finally, my Kamar, what does it mean when he said lifting up the Eved? Achi Kamar. Higbiya li rabbi kanai. Higbiya rabbi loy kanai. But if the master picked up him, then there is no kinyan. Rav Shimon loy techazaka. Gedayla me hagbash. Hagba kaina v'chol makiv. Says Rav Shimon, no. Chazak hagba is kind of everywhere both ways. Therefore, it would have a kidney both ways. We'll stop over here. We'll pick it up from Rav Yirmiyah B'siyata Dishmaya.